Tourists strolling through the park were horrified to discover a group of strange men standing among them. These men had their arms stretched out, just like scarecrows. At first, everyone assumed it was some kind of performance art, but when the staff tried to carry one of the men away, something eerie happened. A strange force has appeared in Japan, one that turns people into immovable human posts. The story begins with a bizarre piece of performance art. On the slightly muggy streets of Tokyo, a group of strange people suddenly appeared all over the city. They struck odd poses and stood completely still. At first, everyone thought it was some kind of performance art, but soon, the citizens realized something was wrong. These people weren't performers. It was as if they were bound in place, unable to move. The eerie scene quickly made headlines across Japan. People started calling them the Bound Ones, a name meaning humans held down by earthbound spirits. But just as everyone was debating why these people were trapped, more of the Bound Ones started to appear. Beyond Tokyo and Osaka, similar cases popped up all over Japan. Rumors began spreading online. Some even believed it might be some kind of virus. One older man tried to force a trapped man back to his home, but by the next day, the man had reappeared in the exact same spot. In no time, all of Japan was in an uproar. Everyone kept their distance from the Bound Ones. On top of being fixed in place, these people also came down with a strange illness. Their eyes couldn't see, and their ears couldn't hear. Even stranger, they weren't mute, yet they still couldn't speak. But amid all the rumors, an organization called the Cuckoo Society stepped forward on its own. Not only did they refuse to shun the Bound Ones, they actually brought them food and water. Besides delivering food every day, the Cuckoo Society was also investigating why these people were being bound. The head of the society was a man named Matsushita. Every day, he traveled all over Japan, recording and registering the new Bound Ones. During their daily work, Matsushita was very caring towards Xiaowen. He cheered her up every day and even gave her little gifts. Xiaowen had a good impression of Matsushita, but for some reason, she always felt an inexplicable unease around him. She stayed busy until evening before finally heading home from work. As she passed a certain intersection, she greeted a man bound there, but the man didn't like Xiaowen. Every time, he just gave her a cold stare and said nothing. Back home, an exhausted Xiaowen went to the bathroom to enjoy a nice, warm bath. Early the next morning, Xiaowen prepared to deliver food as usual, but when she reached the park, she saw an older woman kneeling in front of a young man. From the woman, Xiaowen learned the young man's name was Tanabe, her only son. Just last week, her son had suddenly come to this spot and then got stuck there. No matter how much she pleaded, her son stayed expressionless and refused any communication. Worried about him, the woman came every day to take care of him. As they chatted, the woman explained why her son had come here. It turned out this was where Tanabe's beloved dog was buried. He came to mourn it every weekend. Hearing this, Xiaowen thought of a possibility. Could these bound people be trapped because of their emotional attachments? With that thought, Xiaowen hurried back to headquarters. She told Matsushita about Tanabe's story. Hearing her findings, Matsushita felt this was a real lead. He thought they could investigate along these lines. If they could just find the reason everyone was being bound, maybe they could free these trapped people. To celebrate the discovery, Matsushita decided to treat everyone to dinner. But Xiaowen said she was busy moving apartments lately and had no time that evening. Learning that Xiaowen was moving again, Matsushita found it odd. She had already moved just a few months earlier. Still, Matsushita didn't think much of it. He assumed she was just unhappy with where she lived. When he asked about it, Xiaowen deliberately changed the subject. The busy day soon came to an end, and Xiaowen returned to her rented apartment as usual. But when she arrived at headquarters the next day, she found that the chairman, who was always the first one in the office, hadn't shown up. Xiaowen assumed Matsushita had gone to register some newly appeared Bound Ones. She didn't worry about it and started her deliveries for the day. But when Xiaowen finished and got home, she found someone else in her apartment. She looked down and realized the person in her home was none other than the missing chairman. And Matsushita was just as confused to see Xiaowen. As they talked, Matsushita learned that this was Xiaowen's rented apartment. As for how he'd ended up there, even he had no idea. Xiaowen thought of Tanabe's situation. Could the chairman have some deep attachment he couldn't let go of in this room? But Matsushita said no. He didn't even know where this place was. He'd never been here before, so there was no way he had any attachment to it. But wasn't attachment supposed to be the reason the Bound Ones got trapped? Even though having someone extra in her home felt a little uncomfortable, Xiaowen had nowhere else to go. She had no choice but to make do and let Matsushita stay the night. Early the next morning, the kind-hearted Xiaowen even went to the market to buy groceries and cooked Matsushita a big spread. Tasting Xiaowen's cooking, Matsushita couldn't stop praising it. At the same time, he kept apologizing for being a burden to her. His humility and compliments made Xiaowen very happy. Before she knew it, she started to feel that having someone around wasn't such a bad thing. When she was bored, Xiaowen would chat with Matsushita, and the two grew closer. Her original plans to move were put on hold because of his sudden appearance. But just as Xiaowen imagined she and Matsushita might live like this together, the Japanese government started taking action. To reassure the public, the authorities decided to gather and isolate all the bound ones. But when the workers began clearing them away, an accident suddenly occurred. Because of the sudden accident, the workers didn't dare do anything rash. They could only leave the bound ones where they were. The bizarre scene was broadcast on TV through a reporter's camera. Learning that moving the bound ones carelessly could cause death, Xiaowen didn't dare move Matsushita either. She was careful even when feeding him. Under Xiaowen's thoughtful care, Matsushita was filled with guilt. Suddenly, a possibility struck him. Maybe what was binding him wasn't the room, but Xiaowen herself. Because Matsushita had secretly been in love with Xiaowen all along. Hearing his confession, Xiaowen was a little moved. She, too, revealed a secret buried deep in her heart. It turned out the reason Xiaowen moved every so often was that a few years ago, her apartment had been broken into. She had been assaulted by the intruder. Ever since then, she'd stayed on guard against everything around her. Learning about Xiaowen's ordeal, Matsushita suddenly realized something. He kept apologizing to her. Xiaowen assumed he was apologizing because he'd heard about what happened to her. Her heart even fluttered a little. But was that really the truth? Time quickly moved forward a month. As their time bound stretched on, the bound ones began to change. Their bodies started to petrify, slowly turning into stone. Seeing that her son had started to react, the older woman was frantic. She wanted to get her son moving so he wouldn't turn to stone. But Tanabe was held by that mysterious force and simply couldn't move. Perhaps sensing he was about to fully petrify, Tanabe gave up his last hope. In front of Xiaowen and his mother, he revealed a big secret he'd buried in his heart. It turned out Tanabe's pet hadn't died of illness at all. He had kicked it to death in a fit of anger. Afraid his mother would blame him, he'd pretended to be grieving. This time being bound had finally opened his eyes. He was trapped here not because he missed the dog, but because he was being punished. Hearing Tanabe's tearful confession, Xiaowen thought of the older man at the intersection. That man had also committed a wrong at that spot. With that, Xiaowen suddenly understood everything. What bound these people wasn't attachment or connection, but sin. Xiaowen's theory was soon confirmed. The authorities discovered the same thing. Xiaowen looked at Matsushita in the living room. She asked him exactly what wrong he'd committed in this room to be imprisoned here. But hearing her question, Matsushita still stubbornly insisted he'd never been there before. Xiaowen, however, exposed his lie directly. It turned out a murder had once taken place in this apartment. An intruder disguised as a police officer knocked on the door, forced his way in, assaulted the woman living there, and then brutally killed her in the bedroom. And the murderer was none other than Matsushita himself. But that wasn't the important part. The important part was that, years ago, Xiaowen had been tricked into opening her door the exact same way. Only then did Xiaowen realize what Matsushita meant when he'd said he was sorry. He'd been apologizing for the sin he'd committed long ago. But what good was realizing it only now? In the end, Xiaowen reported Matsushita. The local authorities quickly sent workers over, but when everyone arrived at the apartment, they found Matsushita had already crumbled into rubble. And that's the whole story of the Junji Ito live-action series, The Bound Ones. Overall, the production quality is quite good. It mostly stays faithful to the original manga, though the gray color palette is a little hard on the eyes. Alright, that's all for today's share. See you next time.